basically, when trying to project or predict future developments in fisheries, usually we use models that rely either on optimization and with really rational behavior, or on statistical models. Unfortunately, with all the change that's happening in European fisheries at the moment, so we've got Brexit, we had COVID, oil price, climate change, all of those things are just stressing our models outside of their capacity and outside of the bounds where they actually can provide us a good answer. So it's clear that we need to understand better fishers, and not just by answering which métier they're going to choose, but also we need to understand a bit better why they're choosing the different métiers.
The behavior of fishers is motivated by many things, and they have certain perceptions on what's happening and why it is happening. And they have a certain willingness to do something or not. They have a certain ability to do stuff. So engaging with them and asking them those questions really reveals much more on why it is that they do what they do.
We performed a métier analysis on 16 years worth of logbook data, and then we interviewed 25 Dutch demersal fishermen to understand what other motivations they had for their behaviour. Overall, we found quite a lot of diversity in the group of fishermen. So we found heterogeneity in what would be classified as just a single métier. And we sorted that heterogeneity into 3 factors. The first is the structure of the business. So we noticed that fishermen who are part of a family business behave and are motivated in different ways to fishermen that are part of a larger fishing company. The second factor was the working rhythm. So we found some fishermen thought it was acceptable to work in a continuous rhythm, have their vessel going 7 days a week, whereas other fishermen preferred the more traditional rhythm of coming home for the weekend and letting the vessel stay in the harbour. And the third factor that we found was what we call polyvalence. And this is the degree to which a fisherman specialises his technique. So does he invest a lot in one gear and one main target species, or does he keep his options open by being able to target various species with different gears?
Well, the implications are, in fact, that you have a way better understanding of how, in the same management regime for the same métier, the outcomes are completely different for the different groups of fishermen. So what you see is that some fishers who have invested heavily in getting quota for certain stocks, when there's a decline in those stocks, they are hit more hardly than fishers who are more flexible and switch between gears and species. That then also has implications for managers that have to make tough decisions in these circumstances of change. Because whatever decision it is that you take, it will have a different outcome for different groups of fishermen.
If fisher is really specialized in that, so it can be a gear, an area, a species, things like windmill parts or marine spatial planning in general can have a strong implication on people who are really specialized. While people who move from an area who are more flexible in their activities, they will have much less problems in going somewhere else, in adapting, than the ones that are really, really specialized and bound to an area or a species. We need to take into account this heterogeneity that we identified, so those different factors, so that we understand how management measures or any other drivers of the system will impact the fishers. And I'm saying fishers and not fisheries because every fisher is going to be impacted differently. And that's one thing that's really important to understand. Is there going to be losers and winners? And who are those? And how can their issues be addressed by managers? And so managers also need to understand what can happen and who can be harmed by some of the regulations that they put in place. And now that we are aware that we need more diversity in how we define fisheries in our models, how our fleets are going to behave, that's what we're trying to include in our fleet dynamic models. So basically, we're trying to have smaller groups of more heterogeneous, not only behavior as now, but with people who have similar drivers, so that actually they will move in the same direction. At least making sure that we understand the difference between different groups and making sure that we identify those winners and losers as a support for management.
This was a really valuable collaboration, actually, to try and bring together the strengths of quantitative analysis. So bioeconomic modeling, métier analysis, it brings a lot of strengths and insights from a helicopter view of the fishery. and bringing in the lessons that we learn from anthropology and more ethnographic lessons. Trying to find a way to bring them together was a real challenge of this paper, but I think it's also one of the contributions that it really makes. One of the benefits of doing interviews is that you learn a lot about the fishers when you go. So early on in the research, one of the first fishermen that I met him on his vessel, and I had an interview guide which had several quite simple questions. And one of the first questions we ask is, for how many years have you been a fisherman? I was expecting a one-word answer, but this fisherman spoke for more than 10 minutes about not only his own personal life history, but the life of his grandfather, his father, and also the type of future that he wanted for his son, who was also working in the business. So for us, this was really an indicator that fishing is more than just a job. It's an identity. It's so closely tied up with history and community and a sense of place, and that the history of the fishery is really alive in the stories of these fishermen. And the future as well. They're already thinking and planning ahead for the types of future that they want for the rest of their career and also for their children.